G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. The question today is, can you trust our inflation numbers? I'm talking about the quarterly ABS inflation data. It's used for really important decisions, particularly the RBA cash rate, interest rate decisions. This is affecting people's mortgages, affecting the share market, affecting credit card rates, affecting savings rates. Crucial information. The question is, can you trust it? You're going to be really surprised by what you find out in this video, but it's all sourced. I've even checked things with the ABS themselves, and it is definitely the case. So there's two answers as to whether you can trust these numbers or not, and it depends what use you're putting the ABS inflation data to. Now, I'm talking about the specific data called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. Now, media and people tend to put it to the wrong use. So if we're talking about the change in value of money, the consumer purchasing power, now perhaps you may trust the numbers, but by the end of this video, you may not. If you're talking about CPI as a measure of cost of living and cost of living stress, which the media, particularly our national broadcaster, always is, well then absolutely not. It was never meant to measure that, and it certainly doesn't, as you will see. Now there's three main problems, and they're all going to be a huge surprise to you. But there are a lot of other smaller problems, but I'm going to stick to the main problems, and I'm going to tell you at the end of this presentation where to get more information. Now, the first big problem is there's absolutely no transparency, no accountability. Now, if you're like me and you use ABS data all the time, every single year, I'm putting it into databases, and you see the weird and wonderful things they do, and the mistakes they make one year, and the correction they make to the next year without disclosing the fact that they made a mistake the previous year and had to correct it, you probably wouldn't have that much faith in the data anyway. But the big problem for me, and it always was as a student of economics, when I was lecturing in economics, is this. They do not disclose what is in their basket. You will recall the CPI is a basket of consumer goods, and they track the change in the prices from month to month or quarter to quarter. It used to be quarterly. Recently, we've got these monthly ones, although that's problematic in itself. But I don't have time to go into that right now. So they're tracking this change in the price of consumer basket of goods. The problem is they're not telling you what's in that basket. Now, I know for a fact their basket is not the same as mine because I worked mine out precisely last year, and it went up 10.5%. We're being told that CPI is around 3.5%. So clearly their basket is very, very different to mine. I suspect, and everyone I talk to tells me that their basket is very, very different to the ABS also. Now, it's interesting, I emailed the ABS just to make sure that all the economics textbooks and all my economics lecturers did have the story straight, and this is the reply I got from them. The ABS does not provide specific detail about our samples to protect the confidentiality of respondents. In the CPI, this includes product and store information. So they won't tell you what products are in their basket. And the lame excuse they have is to protect confidentiality. Now, remember what we're talking about here. These are goods and services that they've priced, that someone is selling. If they're selling the thing, the price is displayed. It's public information. There is no confidentiality to protect. It is probably the most ridiculous excuse they could come up with. I suspect, and lots of other people suspect, it's because they don't want people saying, oh, your basket has Tim Tams in, but I only buy Divine cheapy versions from Aldi, or quibbling about the prices and saying, you price that in Sydney, but I live way out in Moombi and everything's 20% dearer because of transport costs. They don't want people second guessing them. I suspect that's the story. But please come up with a sensible excuse for why you don't disclose it. I find it phenomenal, given that people are losing their houses over this. People are losing their businesses over this. People are gaining and losing a lot of money on the bond trading and the equity market, and hence we all are through our super fund. And this national organisation will not list what it is they're using to come up with this number, which ultimately becomes that interest rate decision by the RBA. It's beyond belief. You know, lots of people joke and throw off at the Chinese Communist government and their statistics, but I don't think that people in glass houses ought to be throwing stones. So until our National Statistic Agency sees fit to have transparency and accountability and tell me what's in their basket, I will find it very, very difficult to believe their numbers, particularly when they are so much at odds with mine. But there's another reason why this is never going to represent your particular scenario, and certainly not cost of living increases and cost of living stress. And I'll give you two examples from my own life. Last year, I'm a registered teacher. I used to be a school teacher before someone drove over the top of me in the highway and I had to get screwed back together. Last year, I suddenly got told by NESA, the teachers registration body in New South Wales, that I would have to henceforth pay $100 per year not to teach. Previously, it was free not to teach and keep my license. Now it's cost me $100 per year not to teach. I'm not sure what they think they're doing for that $100 fee. I just can't see it. It shouldn't be a fee. It seems like a tax. But anyway, also last year, iiNet suddenly said, you're not getting free email addresses anymore. You have to do it through this company. Company was initially $25 a year. Now it's $50 a year. I imagine by the time next year comes across, it'll be $100 a year. And there's lots and lots of examples of this. And what they are examples of new items and new fees and charges. Now, a lot of these are coming from governments, state governments and federal governments in particular, because they can't balance their budgets. They went on a spending spree during COVID, and reality is striking now, so they need to get extra revenue. It's coming from me. A lot of it's coming from companies for the same reason. They've got squished margins. They need to get more revenue. So things that were free, complimentary, you're now paying for. And there's lots of examples of that. So for that reason, it's not going to measure your cost of living. Now, the third reason why CPI is not going to have anything to do with your cost of living is because it's not going to represent you. Have a look at these weightings here. Notice that they've changed a lot from pre-COVID to post-COVID. That explains some of the figures we've been getting recently. But think about your own circumstances. I don't buy any tobacco, so the weighting there is no use to me. I own my own house, 22% weighted for housing costs. Mostly doesn't apply to me. I've got two children in private school, so the education cost for me is much, much higher than this. Now, it's never going to reflect everyone's situation, but it's particularly problematic when it's used for decision making in an inappropriate way. So let me give you an example. You may or may not know that DSS increases welfare recipient payments at least twice per year by the higher of CPI or their tailored cost of living index. Now, let's think about age pensioners. Nothing against age pensioners. I hope to live long enough to be one myself one day. But realistically, should we be indexing age pensions to an index that includes 4.34% for education expenses, when we know very well that age pensioners do not have kids in school? Should we be indexing DSS receipts, welfare recipients, for alcohol and tobacco when it's not a necessity of life? Now, these are moral judgments, and the ABS say they specifically do not make moral judgments about what they stick in their basket, that they won't tell us what's in it. But it is a problem. There's a lot more to inflation. There's a lot more reasons to be extremely cautious about using this data, and I cover that in my book. I've got the screenshot of the cover up there, Creating Human Value as Public Management Theory. That'll be out very shortly. There's one more slide, and it's really important if you haven't seen it before, because it explains why inflation's not going anywhere. And I should have said you need to take extreme care, of course, when using CPI for local government decision making. And most of the time that local government is using it, it's using it incorrectly. Now, I've had other videos about that. CPI is not a good measure for most decisions in local government. Now, the last thing is to tell you why inflation's not just going to suddenly disappear because we don't like it. Look at this money supply graph. Look at how much additional money is being created in the Australian economy and in the global economy, and money is global these days. Until the global output increase matches that additional money supply that was created during the COVID years, inflation just can't disappear unless Milton Friedman was a dummy, and I don't believe he was. Look, I hope you found this video interesting. It's a more general information one, but all these things are important to local government decision makers, and you do need to know these economic concepts in enough detail to know whether you can rely on the data, whether it is the appropriate data for what you're using it for. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.